All right, so I want to take a moment to explain why I chose the 2007 exam. I thought it had some good stuff that I expect to see similar questions to on this year's AP. And I'll highlight that as we go through. We actually have seen question one before. I can't remember where this was. I think it was actually one Bob Lachelle used in the one we did last Thursday. But we've seen these strawberries before. You'll see that all he did was steal the context part of this question, then he changed up every question that came next. So we still have a brand new question to us minus this context about strawberries and whether or not preservatives can help with discoloration. So we've got our little comparative dot plots. When we saw this in the other FRQ, we were given a sample mean and sample standard deviation, a bunch of summary stats for each. Here we're just given the dot plots. But again, I really expect us to see something on the AP where we are given two different sets or either a dot plot, a histogram, or a box plot comparing two groups and us having to do SOCs in that context. So in this one, they didn't actually ask us for SOCs. I think that might be a good indication too of what would happen on the real AP, is that SOCs is pretty formulaic. We all kind of know how to do that, like that's a gimme. And instead they ask us a question sort of about how the SOCs, the distribution, would impact some conclusion you might make. So anyways, our first question, question A, this is one that's just on that interpretations page. They're asking us to interpret the standard deviation. I think these things are pretty likely to happen. One of them, the best thing to do here is just really make sure you read the question carefully, that you're interpreting the right thing. As we saw last week, a lot of people interpreted the confidence interval instead of the confidence level. So there's lots of places to get in trouble with this. So we have the standard deviation for the control group, so talking about this group, is 2.141. Explain how this value summarizes variability in the control group. And really all we want to do is go, oh, standard deviation, that's on that page of interpretations. And it says something like the typical distance between, and then we need to talk about what our actual observations of, and so, or are of. In this case, it's ratings. If you want to be even classier, you could say discoloration ratings. And this is how much they differ from average, right? And the mean discoloration rating, can't fit all of this, is 2.141 for the control group. I can't fit this, so I'm just making up little things. So yes, we're looking at something saying typical distance. That's important. And then we've got our context, the actual observations, and the mean for that. I am worried that if you didn't include the word control group in this particular one, you would not get full points because we were specifying one of the two groups, and that is important. So, I'm hoping that you get one of these on the test, and I do think that'll happen, that you have one that's literally just grab something off of that list that we have and plug and chug the context in, which takes a little bit of practice to make sure that you've got them right. So if you did this and you have something that varies a little bit from this and you want to make sure that it still will get full points, that it would still get an E, feel free to send it over to me via email. But right, this one, I think the only thing it was looking for was the definition of standard deviation, which is a typical distance of our values from the mean, and context. And that was what you needed to get an E on this particular part. All right, part B says, based on the dot plots, comment on the effectiveness of the preservative in lowering the amount of discoloration in strawberries. So we have actually played a lot with this problem already. We actually saw that whole thing where they gave us like a median, we had to calculate, right? We got all that. They say no calculations necessary. So this is one of those things I think they might do instead of just a typical SOCs question, is they're telling us to use the dot plots, which means that we do care about SOCs. And we need to comment on the effectiveness of the preservative. So which part of SOCs would really tell us about which one was, whether or not the preservative worked. Is it the shape, the outliers, the center, or the spread? And we should be focusing on center here. So we could say, because the treatment group shows a smaller center on the dot plot. Treatment appears to lower discoloration. Blah, 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 blah. And that's really all they looked for in the rubric for this question, was that you answered the question and said, yes, the treatment appears to have less discoloration. It appears to be effective in lowering this amount, and that you referenced back to the dot plots in some measure of relative standing. And so what they mean by relative standing, of course, could be center. This is used very generically. I would hope from you guys I'd see better than this. No offense. It says no calculations necessary, but it doesn't take very much time or effort to calculate a median from a dot plot, right? We could look up and see, okay, we have 25 bags in each group. So half of 25 is 12.5. We're looking for about the 12th or 13th bag. I mean, if you want to be really good about it, we know the median position is n plus 1 over 2. We're technically looking for the 13th bag of strawberries. And we count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So then we could actually compare and say, oh, well, the median in this group is this, and the median in that group is that. And we actually have an even more robust explanation. If you went in and started talking about how the treatment group has some that have like 1 discoloration, whereas this one has 2, also a really good thing to talk about. I don't think that that would be enough to only talk about the minimum, especially when you look at the max and see that it's 10 for both. So I do think some measure of center, whether you're calculating a mean or a median, will be stronger. Or just choosing a cutoff, sort of like we did in that one example problem, and saying, okay, let's look at just like 5 or less. You know, if we look at 5 or less in the control group, there are 6. And in this other group, I don't want to count, but I will, 6, 9. It looks like we might have 15 in the control group. So just at that discoloration level of 5, we've got a heck of a lot more in the treatment group than the control group that are below that. So some other piece I would hope to see from you guys. Definitely answer the question. Do it in that generic, like the center is smaller, but then even though it says no calculations necessary, maybe this is one, if you're doing it on the AP this year, you skip and you come back and say, okay, I know I could go calculate the median if I have extra time to give this a little bit more oomph. All right, so the last one here, they say they decided to calculate a 95% confidence interval for the difference in means. So this is that mu1 minus mu2. Remember, I gave you guys in that little interpretations and that inference thing, this idea that if we have plus plus, that means 0 is not contained within the interval, which means we can actually say group 1's mean is greater than group 2's mean. It's always mu1 minus mu2. So, oh, it says not treated first. I was like, whew. So group 1 in this case is the not treated, the control. I guess I'll write control. I was like, how could that work? It's supposed to be less. Control, and our group 2 are preservative. All right. So we get all this. You kind of see this go, okay, there's a confidence interval since it's for a difference, which is super important to me. I know that I'm just looking at minus plus, plus plus, minus minus, like what's going on. They go ahead and give me the interval, which is plus plus, which is why I wrote that. Assume the conditions are met. And then it says, based on the confidence interval, comment on whether or not there will be a difference in the discoloration for treated and untreated strawberries. So now they're saying, okay, can we actually say something based on the interval? And so this is where the rubric, and hopefully you guys did 2 things. You said, since 0 is not in the interval, oops. Right? That's the whole point, is 0 included. We could reject. And of course, you would not write RTN, that's our shorthand, but you could reject the null, where the null in this case would have been that the mean for the first group is the same as the mean for the second group, right? That is one part of the rubric. They didn't make you say this other piece about rejecting the null. That's me being a little extra. But they wanted you to say, because 0 wasn't in the interval. And now you need to have your conclusion, right? The conclusion is there a difference in the population mean discoloration ratings for blah, 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 blah. There is a difference. And if we want to be good about this, we probably write there is enough evidence, because we know there is a difference. Sounds a little too strong, a little too deterministic. There is enough evidence to conclude. And then this sentence right here, right? Difference in the population mean discolorations, blah, 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 blah. If we want to go a little bit further, right? Again, this should have been enough. If you actually look at the rubric, they said something about the interpretation or conclusion. To me, this is the interpretation and conclusion. You gave me why, and you told me what the answer was. Now, I might want to go a little bit further if I was you as a student. I might want to say the interval being positive indicates the control group or the unpreserved strawberries have a larger discoloration, average discoloration rate than the preservative strawberries. Or you could even go ahead and use that sentence about your mean or your interval. We are 95% confident, and then just grab this mean difference in mean blah 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 is between 0.16 and 2.72. So that piece to me is extra, having some additional statements saying, okay, not only do we know that there's a difference, but we know that the preservative group has a lower mean, is to me something I would want to include. So anyways, that was pretty much the first question. I like it, and I think it has some really good pieces to it. I think this idea of having a set of plots and then being asked something more than just generic socks, but like to use socks in order to answer a question, that part B, I can see something like that happening. I do see us having to deal with some basic just interpretation question as sort of hopefully a gimme, because we have those all written down on a piece of paper and we're just sort of plugging and chugging. And then this one is also nice in terms of the AP for the last question, because in the last question, we're being given everything we need and they're not making us do any calculations. We're just interpreting output. So all three of these parts, when I looked at it, I went, this is worth having you guys step through all of it for these reasons.